If this is going to be the last spoiler video I make on TikTok, I may as well make it the movie with the most devastating ending possibly ever. Let's fucking do it. Mist opens up and introduces us to this man named David Drayton and his wife Stephanie, and they live in Maine with their 8-year-old son Billy. One night, this really severe thunderstorm hits the town and causes all the power to go out and also causes this tree to fall in the Drayton's yard. David, along with his son Billy and their neighbor Brent, decide to go into town to get some supplies. On the way into town, they pass a few military convoys, which kind of raises a red flag for them. Eventually, they get to the supermarket. But as they get there, this mysterious mist suddenly rolls in and just engulfs the whole place. A few minutes later, this guy Dan, who lives in the town, bursts into the supermarket saying that there is something in the mist and whatever you do, do not go outside. Everybody starts panicking, and this one woman, who I don't think we ever actually get her name, but she starts crying, saying she needs to go home to her kids because she left them home alone. She begs everybody in the market to go with her, but everybody refuses, so she sets off by herself and she goes into the mist. Everybody starts talking about what to do next, and David is talking to Ollie, who works in the store in this local gym. This kid named Norm, who is a teenager who is a bagger in the store, decides that he's going to go outside to try to fix the store's generator to get the power back on. David tries to convince him not to do it and is like, Dan said there's something in the mist, like this is not a good idea. But Jim tells Norm like, nah dude, that's a great idea, do it. It is not a great idea. Because immediately upon the door opening, this tentacle comes in and grabs Norm and drags him off into the mist. David and the group try to pull him back in to no avail, he's gone. The ones who witness this try to tell everybody about it, but not everybody is buying it. Brent, David's neighbor, doesn't believe it at all and decides to just leave the store. He and a group of people just walk out of the store and they are never to be seen again. They belong to the mist now. As this has all gone down, we've also met Amanda and Mrs. Carmody. Amanda kind of joins the group that David's getting together that is actually trying to maintain order and calmness. Mrs. Carmody, however, who is known throughout the town for being a crazy religious fanatic, starts preaching about how this is divine punishment and this is the end of times, and she starts freaking everybody out. First, everybody in the store thinks that Mrs. Carmody is insane. Until that night when the store comes under attack. These giant flying insects break through the window and start attacking everybody in the night. These things kill several people and wound a few others, but when one of them lands on Mrs. Carmody, she starts praying and it just flies away. Because of this, people actually start to believe her and take her side, and she starts getting increasingly more out of control. As a result of the attack, one of the people in the store ends up getting severely injured and burned. So David leads a group of them, including Jim and Ollie, to the pharmacy next door to try to get medication for him. Once they get there, they find webs everywhere and they're attacked by these spider-like creatures who kills a couple of people in the group that went. The rest of the group gets back to the supermarket. Tensions are rising. More and more of them seem to be siding with Mrs. Carmody, who is just striking fear into everybody. This even includes Jim, who just went to the pharmacy and came back, and after what he saw is now on Mrs. Carmody's side. So David and his dwindling group end up talking to Private Jessup. So he and a couple others from the military were in the market, and the other two have since hanged themselves. And Jessup now reveals that it's because they feel guilty, because it turns out that these creatures are the result of a failed military experiment in which they tried to find other worlds. Jim, who is now a Carmody follower, hears this and drags Jessup up into Mrs. Carmody's mob. And Mrs. Carmody tells everybody that they need a sacrifice to appease the monsters. And of course, they make that sacrifice Private Jessup. They throw him out to the mist and lock him out there and watch a creature take him away and kill him. At this point, everybody has fully turned against each other. There are very clearly two sides of this. And the next morning, Mrs. Carmody now calls that Billy needs to be the next one sacrificed. Now, David and his group, which consists, of course, of his son, as well as Amanda, this older woman Irene, Dan, and Ollie, already decided that they need to get the fuck out of Dodge because Mrs. Carmody's group has gotten way too out of hand. So they try to leave, and Mrs. Carmody and her group block the entrance and try to physically take Billy from them to sacrifice him. Ollie's like, nah. He finally shoots her and fucking kills her. Nobody will miss you, Mrs. Carmody. She is one of the worst characters of all time. So David and his group finally get outside and they run into the mist and make a run for David's car. During this, Ollie is very sadly killed by one of the creatures, R.I.P. Ollie. The five of them manage to take the gun from Ollie, get into his car, and they drive off. They drive by David's house where they see the body of his wife in his yard, so she's dead. And they continue to drive through the town and just see all this destruction and all these bodies as this really dramatic music plays. Then they witness this giant creature come out of the mist and pass right in front of them. Eventually, David stops the car and he looks at the group and realizes there's only one way out of this. And he looks in Ollie's gun and sees that there are 4 bullets remaining. To which Amanda says, "There's 5 of us," and he says, "I'll figure it out." David proceeds to mercy kill the 4 of them, including his own son. Now, we don't actually see this happen. We get a shot of the car from outside in the mist and we just hear the gunshots go off. David puts the gun to his own head, desperately trying to pull the trigger to end it, but of course there are no bullets left. So he gets out of the car and he steps into the mist to let the creatures take him. What emerges from the mist is not the creatures. It's the fucking military. With tanks, machine guns, flamethrowers. This truck drives by carrying survivors, one of which is the woman that we had seen earlier with her children. If they had just gone with her like she asked, they probably would have been fine. She just looks at David, who at this point falls to his knees. David looks around as he sees the military destroying these creatures and rescuing survivors, as he realizes that had he just waited a few seconds, everything would have been fine. And he looks up at the sky and screams in agony, and the movie ends.